Hello and welcome to Coptrz webinar, the ELIOS to the safest inspection drone in the world. My name's George Byrne and I'm here today with RaptorUAS and Flyability. We've got Anna Gamara and Junio. So we are going to kick off in the next sort of 30 seconds or so. I just want to do a quick sound check so everyone can hear us, everyone can hear my colleagues, Junio and Anna, and then we will get going. But thank you very much for joining us today, guys. Hope everybody's well. And yeah, really exciting, really looking forward to hosting this with you guys. Just noticing that people are putting questions into the question box. That's brilliant. We will be doing a quick Q&A at the end of the show. But if we don't get round to everybody, bear in mind we will make sure that we answer all of those questions even by the end of the day. So I'll get an email out to you guys because we've got your details. Brilliant, good stuff. So without further ado, just to introduce myself and Coptrz, my name is George Byrne. I'm a UAV strategist. I work primarily with the inspection companies in the UK, but Coptrz in general, I'm a leading commercial drone solutions provider. So more of an umbrella solution provider from the training, equipment, and then consultancy further down the line. As you see, we've enabled over 1,000 commercial businesses to benefit from drone technology. And that's what we're proud of. We're proud of helping companies like RaptorUAS, like the utilities, oil and gas, by giving them the best in world solutions that they can go out and make a real positive impact with. We provide a full solution, and what we're really proud of is being a partner with Flyability, cutting edge technology. Yeah, really proud to say that we do the training, equipment supply, and the repairs in the UK. So as you see, Flyability is one of our main partners, but we also, look for full solutions. And what's great about that is because Flyability allow for the use of point clouds, data capture. They work quite nicely with Pix4D. So there is really good complementary software and parts to each partner that we have. As you see, we do try and support as many companies as possible in many different industries. As you can see, we're quite inept with the utilities industry, offshore oil and gas, and construction, especially for the ELIOS 2, which we're showcasing today. But without further ado, let me introduce you to Junio from Flyability.
Thank you very much, George. It's a pleasure being here with you. I hope you can hear me. You can all hear me all right. I see some very familiar names in the list of attendees. Thanks for those that already know us, and thanks also especially to the new ones that have decided to join us today. Very briefly about myself, this month marks my third year at Flyability. I used to take care at the beginning of inspection companies, so UK has always been sort of an historically important market for myself. Last year I transitioned to a more global role, taking care essentially of the European, Middle Eastern, and African market as a whole, and it's that in that capacity that I still have the pleasure of working very closely with George at Coptrz and with companies such as RaptorUAS. I'm sure most of you have already sort of come across our product or our company. In fact, the two often seem to be interchangeable. Just very briefly about Flyability, we were elected best Swiss startup last year. This is our 5th year that the company has been established. We're currently a team of 80 with 400 customers around the world. Actually, this number we just realized yesterday, it's pretty outdated. I do apologize for that. We actually just broke the 1,000 drone threshold a couple of days ago. Pretty proud of that number. And just to give you an idea of the success of our ELIOS 2 product last year, we managed to sell more than one per day last year. So we're quite proud of the second iteration of our confined space drone solution. Globally, we work with approximately 35 among resellers and commercial partners. Coptrz being very much our ambassador in the United Kingdom. The leitmotif of the company, and very much sort of the mantra or the mission statement, if you will, it's really that we believe that robots have achieved a level of sophistication, drones as far as we are concerned, a level of sophistication that is high enough for them to replace humans in the most dangerous environments. The legend goes that our CTO and founder Adrian had this idea while watching the accident of Fukushima and wondering why 25 years after Chernobyl we still had to send engineers to simply perform a visual inspection. So while most of the world was trying to fit as many sensors as possible on a drone to make it avoid collision, actually Adrian worked the problem the other way around, and that's how he came up with what was then gimbal, then became ELIOS 1, so the first collision tolerant drone in the world. We took a stand. We started working on this concept before 2014. Obviously, the big break came in 2015 when the company won the Drones for Good award in Abu Dhabi, and that represented the first seed money, a $1 million prize point that essentially allowed us to develop and industrialize the design of the ELIOS 1. And since then, we found that more and more companies have taken a stand, even publicly, company like Chevron, they've taken a stand against confined spaces risk, committing the health and safety policies to reduce or zero in on this kind of entries, which still present a major sort of issues, especially obviously in terms of accidents, but also in terms of cost and downtime, as Anna will present shortly in her part of the presentation. As far as we are concerned, we believe that technology and time is on our side. Just a few years ago, this sort of concept was unheard of, and here we are 5 years later, 1,000 drones later, working with some of the largest asset owners and some of the best inspection companies in the world to help them avoid human entry in confined spaces. From a sales point of view, and I'm sure that George will agree with this, ELIOS is an amazing product to pitch because there's benefits for everyone. When you're looking at this from a health and safety point of view, the risk avoidance element, it's just so paramount, and it's just so powerful and poignant in the mind of whoever is actually performing the job or who is doing the risk assessment. You can't just get around the fact that in most assets where you operate, there is no need for human entry. You can just pilot the drone remotely from outside the structure, and that completely eliminates the need and the risks attached to putting humans in harm's way, or at heights, for instance. Not just when we talk about confined spaces, it's not just the risk itself, but also, for instance, all those risks related to rope access inspections or inspections on scaffolds. The second element that certainly makes this very relevant for asset owners is reduced downtime. The more we talk to clients, the more we talk with asset owners, the larger the asset, the more significant the downtime, the more frustrating it is and costly it is to keep it off. And we keep collecting incredible and valuable data in terms of inspections that normally should have been performed in matters of weeks that can be performed in a matter of days and sometimes even hours, and that's because of the ease of use of the platform itself. So for all those of you trying to build a business case out there for this kind of technology, do not hesitate to reach out to myself or George. We have numbers, we can show them to you in terms of the case studies and how company have benefited in terms of reduced downtime. Last but certainly not least is the lower cost. So here in this particular sense, we're not just talking about the operating costs anymore, but we're talking about the capital expenditures related to things like scaffolding an entire boiler, for instance, or the inside of a chimney. Just think about that particular cost point. On top of that, you have to consider how much lower the premium on insurance risk would go if you can actually demonstrate that you don't need to put humans inside this confined space structure. So it's really a trifecta of benefits that make this value proposition really universal inside a company, whether you're pitching it to the health and safety people, to the operations management people, or to the CFO.
Absolutely, I think especially in the current climate, companies are looking for cheaper, better alternatives, and safer is always the key point at the moment. So it really does hammer home that the lower cost, reduced downtime, and improved safety is key talking points for business cases.
I think you raised an excellent point, George. I think especially with the price of crude, the WTI at these levels, companies must look into any possible means to reduce the cost of inspecting, for instance, storage tanks, assuming that there are any empty at this stage. And ELIOS has really become the go-to choice for a large number of refineries around the world.
Absolutely.
So we've been working on this presentation for quite a while, and I still find the hierarchy of hazardous controls to be the best way to explain the value of ELIOS. And this is even more relevant, I think, when talking in a country like the United Kingdom, with the common law, and especially the duty of care concept, which is not something that you find necessarily in all other legislation, but I'm sure that all of you are familiar with it. And it's such a neat and straightforward way to explain why this product it's really a no-brainer when you start looking at it from a point of view of risks and risk management. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with the inverted pyramid, and essentially you are from top to bottom, from the most effective to the least effective. And if we can just move to the next slide, you will realize, and you will probably accept as a matter of fact, that the majority of the confined spaces works at the moment, they only really rely on the bottom two elements to perform this kind of inspections. So either change the way people work through new procedures. For instance, we can talk about hot work permits or confined spaces entry permits for that matter, or really the only remedy that people have for avoiding drop fall objects from a railing or from a scaffolding is to use PPE. But that's just not enough, both in terms of the duty of care of the employer and in general, considering the technological alternatives that are out there. So suddenly, when we start thinking outside of these terms, outside of the status quo, outside of, oh, but we've always done it this way, oh, but the procedures dictate that we do it this way, there are other options. And true. Often, especially in the oil and gas environment, ELIOS does require hot work permit in order to be operated safely or in accordance with the refinery procedures. But it suddenly gives a whole new perspective on risk management for confined spaces. If we move to the next slide, we'll actually see how ELIOS 1, both, and ELIOS 2 sit at the very top of this pyramid, because you completely remove the need for human entry in confined spaces. So suddenly you're not looking anymore at getting permits for confined space entry or simply wearing PPE and essentially hoping for the best. You're really tackling this issue in the most effective way, which is operating a drone from outside with a licensed and trained operator that can perform visual inspections that more and more are being recognized by bodies like Bureau Veritas, like Lloyd's Registry, and other certification societies that recognize the value of the technology, not just in terms of health and safety, not just in terms of cost, but in terms of data. The quality of the data, and Anna will cover this point in detail. It's really staggering, and it's really sort of up there with the most precise visual inspections that you can perform with the naked eye. So it's not just a replacement, it's not just a substitution. It's really the best alternative for confined spaces inspections without compromising on the quality of the reports themselves.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think you've answered that. Excellent. So just some key points, and I think we will move on to some of the industries. Junior, if you just want to go through a couple of these, that'd be brilliant.
Thank you, George. Yes. So oil and gas, it's very much our bread and butter in the UK. It definitely represents the largest portion of the markets that we cover with Coptrz. I basically lived in Aberdeen for part of the year last year during the roadshow, and definitely we have some very big ambassadors in this industry, mostly from the point of view of inspection companies like RaptorUAS. We tend to work mostly as a tier 2 or a tier 3 supplier, just because of the way that the industry is structured through these layers of contractors and subcontractors. In no small part, again, thanks to the work of George and his team, we started to make strides also in power generation. Surprisingly, not as much in coal, but more on the nuclear side of things. Nuclear power generation still remains a bit of a untouched from this kind of evolution or of innovation in the UK, whereas, for instance, in Italy, which, as you might gather from my mild accent, is another one of my main markets, we work very closely with Enel, one of the largest power generation companies in the world, and using this for boiler inspections inside coal-fired or gas turbines in gas generation, it's really become the state-of-the-art way of operating, of performing these inspections. Chemicals as well. This is one of our biggest success stories. I'm happy to go more into details later on this, but we essentially managed to turn Dow Chemical from a client to an investor. We became integral part of their inspection processes, so much so that they actually bought shares in the company to guarantee the future R&D development of new products. And chemicals in this case doesn't simply mean oil and gas. There's a ton of opportunities, I think, in the UK market for everything related, for instance, to pharma chemicals. And as far as mining is concerned, obviously, UK, maybe we're a couple of 100 years late on this particular part, but I'm sure there's still plenty of abandoned mines or mining operating equipment that could be safely inspected with this particular tool. Last but not least, we've been very active also on the public safety sector. Obviously, most of these details are confidential, I just want to mention the inspection that we performed on the Liverpool Echo parking lot that burned down. This is available on our website, and it was the very first case that we know of a confined space drone used for a forensic investigation. I was the pilot on that mission, so I'm particularly proud of its outcome, and I encourage you to take a look at it on our website. But yeah, happy to take more questions on this in terms of if you're interested in exploring them further from a business point of view.
Yeah, just to touch on that, I think what's fantastic about the ELIOS 2 and what we've seen over the last sort of 12 months is the applications pretty endless. You know, even during the COVID-19 period, we've had companies looking at the ELIOS 2 for site inspections when legally and down to insurance, they're not actually allowed on site. So flying for security missions, for industrial inspection and integrity missions, the ELIOS 2 is a perfect candidate for going into these areas where you're not actually allowed to step foot in. So having a robot, having a drone to go in and do that is really opening the doors for a lot of companies to carry on working. You know, instead of shutting down and having all that risk, they can continue to have some really good results. So moving on, I'd like to introduce our guest today, Anna Gamara from RaptorUAS. I'll hand you over to Anna now just to discuss herself, how she's using the ELIOS 2, and then we're going to go on to some really good case studies that Anna has brought to us. I think it's going to be really applicable to a lot of people. So really excited about this. So thank you very much for joining us, Anna.
Hi, George. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. I will just quickly introduce myself. I'm been working now in Raptor for about 2 years. I graduated naval architecture, but I've been working from shipbuilding to offshore wind. I'm international welding engineer. I have NDT tickets, coding inspection, and I am also a EMER 159 tank assessor. And on the side of that, we do on our partner company road practice, and on RaptorUAS, we basically fly drones, and I can also fly drones. If you can go on the next slide, please, George. So for us in Raptor, we started in 2017, and we understood that moving into drones were the best possible solution for some of the access and to get into inspection and doing it on the best and safest and most cost-effective way. We have implemented drone inspection on every place and a client and asset that we have seen to fit, and we're in any case that we have seen the drone inspection as the best solution and method for access. We are implemented also artificial intelligence, not only to analyze the data that we acquire during our inspections, but also to improve our flying paths and our data acquisition during flight. So we combine not only the part of the visual that is most common for the drones, but we have also included different types of payloads and different drone platforms. So we not only use ELIOS, which is probably my favorite drone, but we also have thermal inspection, ultrasonic, and gas detection, vacuum thickness measurements. And we can do all that in confined spaces. So we remove the need of people entering in confined space. We are definitely providing, our drones are providing way of access that eliminates all the need for working at height for confined space entry, and it provides a very cost-effective solution for asset management from the inspection point of view. Well, I think we have talked about it for cost-effective and safety before. Junior has done it, and also you, George, have mentioned it before. There is a very cost-effective solution to implement those inspections. We have seen about a 60%, depending on the situation, depending on the access, on the different scenarios or premises industries that we are working, but it's about a 60% compared to other access methods such as scaffolding, MUPs, or rope access inspection. We have a significant reduction of downtime. We do have a shorter setup and a much faster inspection. So as previously June has mentioned, we are talking about reducing inspections from weeks to days. So now anything that we have done, for example, inside tanks, instead of have to build a scaffold for access that it will take few weeks and then do the inspection itself, we are actually collecting all the data with the drone in few hours on site, and that's done on site. And after that, we have all the information available to go through and to analyze back at the office. We can perform also multiple assets in a single mobilization, and all this enhances condition monitoring of any assets. On the safety, from the safety point of view, we definitely reduce and eliminate the working at height needs, any works in scaffolds and rope access. It provides us that safe access to confined spaces, removing the need of confined space entry, and it also allows to maintain a standard distance from the asset. In this case, for example, the ELIOS 2, it was a great improvement from the ELIOS 1 because it has that feature of locking the distance from the asset, so it will never get any closer. And if you set your distance to 300 millimeters, it will just follow the inspection without actually getting in touch with any surface or any equipment that you are inspecting at that moment. So great tool, and great to also operate when there are other personnel or other working in progress.
Yeah, so just touching on that, Anna, the locking of the distances to keep you sort of from a safe distance from what you're actually inspecting. How is that benefiting you for doing sort of reliable, consistent data?
Well, it allows you, as you are flying on the same, first, it makes the inspections of flying much easier, because as soon as you are on the area of concern or the inspection equipment or whatever that you want to have a look at, it's much easier to just lock the distance and follow that element. And on the other hand, you also know it's easier to measure any difference that you can encounter. So if you have a good reference of what's the distance to your asset on that time, and you can just scale any possible defect. So I think it's a great tool for even for analyzing data afterwards.
Fantastic. I know that because you know the y-axis, you can get the x. So are you using that for measurements as well?
Sorry?
Are you using the post-processing tools for measurements?
Yeah, we are. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Good stuff. So a couple of questions I have seen come up, and just on the safety side, Anna, just a question for you is what sort of safe setup, what sort of risk assessment do you do before going into an asset or before flying?
It really depends a lot on the type of asset that we are flying. For example, the picture that is now on the slide is a boiler from energy from waste. So in this case, we were doing the operation with a rope access. This is our ELIOS one, together with the rope access team. And basically, in this case, it's atmosphere. So we check that there is no explosive, or we have oxygen enough in this case because of the personnel, even if it has a breathing apparatus. And also temperature, but risk assessment is basically safe entry in case that we are accessing the confined space with the drone. Otherwise, just check atmosphere, check that we are not going to have any kind of residue or product inside the tank that can affect the performance of the ELIOS, or even the data acquisition, because we have seen before that if the cameras or sensors, they get dirty during the inspection, the data that you are collecting is just not the best. And then with the sensors also getting dirty during flight, it's harder to fly. So we always know the type of tank or the type of product that it was stored previously on the tank. And based on that, we just decide how is the best, and maybe we carry out a continuous cleaning of the drone every time that we change the battery, so we know that we will be okay during flight.
Fantastic, fantastic.
So yeah, for tank inspection, I wanted to show how we are using the ELIOS and other drone platforms to carry out confined space inspections. All these photos were taken with the ELIOS too. So they are on tanks, and we can do basically what I would classify as structural surveys, coating surveys, and corrosion and insulation inspections. So for the structural surveys, we normally look for cracks, for mechanical damages, for misalignments, missing objects, and this allows, during the inspection, normally we still have, we mobilize 2 people, always as a minimum, a remote pilot who is just controlling the drone, and then a person who is reviewing the data, the videos at the same time. So if there is anything that it comes flag out during the inspection, we can check on the same time to save on live, doing them just maybe a close-up slide, or just have more images of any areas of concern. But however, we are still recording, and we have a permanent record which can be reviewed and analyzed afterwards, and it can be provided to the client or to any third party for further assessment. Then for coating survey, what we are normally checking is blistering or grades of different corrosion, or grades of coating failures, and also for heavy loss of material thickness, scaling, and scabs and different type of forms of corrosion. And then corrosion under insulation. This is a big topic for insulated tanks that operate at high temperatures, or just like over ambient temperature. In these cases, because there is insulation on the outside, it's obviously only performed from the internal when the tanks are out of service, but sometimes the client or the tank owner or the operator know that they have a problem, or that they are experiencing some leakages, but they don't know where the leakages are or what's the condition of their tank. So we can access from the inside, do a full visual inspection on the plate, on the shell plate, and on the roof, and assess any areas of heavy corrosion, or if we see any through wall defects, then we know those areas that will need more focus, even if the other ones will need a more in-depth inspection.
Brilliant. Just so, compared to a traditional method of doing these inspections, how does it compare to speed and to safety?
Well, for speed is basically, as I mentioned before, for accessing these places, you will need to be on the scaffold. I think, cannot remember exactly the diameter of the tank on the first picture, but I know in the second one was a 35 meter diameter tank, which if we are building, or if the client will have to build a scaffold and we have to carry inspections, we are talking probably about at least 3 to 4 weeks to complete a job that was done in 8 hours for the inspection. And and then just analyze the data. So on time scale, it's reduced dramatically. And the amount of data that you are also capturing is exactly the same. I'm an inspector myself, so I know that when I'm going and I'm doing inspections myself, I only capture the data that I want to highlight, or that I think that there is any concern. However, with the drone, you capture everything, so you have a permanent record that you can compare on next inspections, and you are able to have like a good comparison and a good overview of how your asset is behaving, and if there is any accelerating degradation or any problems that it might come from the inspections. So that's from the time scale point of view. And from the safety, basically you are avoiding working at height, and you can avoid confined space entry. So So it's no-brainer for implementing drones in a daily basis for inspection.
Anna, if if I may also ask a question here, I'd like to tackle the issue of the battery from a professional user point of view. So now, obviously, the flight time of the ELIOS is somewhat it is lower compared to other outdoor drone usages. Drones for outdoor usages. From the point of view of an inspector, when inspecting an asset like a tank, does it really have an impact on the efficiency and the efficacy? Like, does it have an impact on how good is the inspection report in the end, or it doesn't really matter from where you stand as a pilot and as an inspector?
I really don't think it has any impact. I will be honest here. I remember the first time that we went to have a look at the ELIOS one. George was introducing us to the ELIOS one, and we were highly disappointed on the battery. And I have to say that it was 10 minutes, and we were thinking, no, we cannot make anything with 10 minutes. However, as soon as we started using ELIOS 1 and now with ELIOS 2, you see actually that 10 minutes are a lot of data, and you can cover a lot of surface on those 10 minutes. So I'm impressed. I'm definitely very impressed with the potential that you have on those 10. Well, now it's a bit more, it's about 15 minutes that you have with ELIOS 2, and it's just unbelievable the amount of data that you can collect. And that's it. I don't think it makes any difference on doing it visually by someone or just having the data. Actually, I think that it helps having the data already recorded, and you can just go through the data afterwards. So if you, at some point, you get tired of looking at corrosion, you can just stop, have a break, go back to your images, and just, continue going through. So I really don't think that it's a problem at all. I see it as a benefit, and that 10, 12, 15 minutes, because most of the times people ask, and when you said, you can fly, well, let's say any other drones that are like 25 minutes, 30 minutes batteries, and they are already thinking that that's like too low. But actually, when you are conducting your inspection and you plan your inspection, which is very important, you can get a lot of information on those 12 minutes flying. So no issues at all.
Thank you so much, and I think it just carries a complete different weight when it comes from a user, an intensive user such as yourself, rather than from two salesmen like myself and George. So thank you for that.
No problem.
Brilliant, excellent application.
So, well, for the ELIOS, this is more focused on ELIOS and ELIOS team particularly. So there are like different features that makes the ELIOS, I would say, more appropriate or better for inspection, particularly on confined space. We have the oblique lighting. It was a big problem at the beginning with the lighting, because the dust, as you have sometimes on confined spaces, it doesn't allow you to see anything. That's now sorted on the ELIOS 2. You can have like a very dust environment. You don't see any dust, so that's great. And on top of that, because of the oblique lighting, you can also have some perception on 3D. So you can see details on pitting and well defects and cracks, so you can perform well inspection just with the data that you are collecting with the ELIOS 2. You have the 4K video. It has the, most of the people are quite familiar with the USAS resolution chart. So the ELIOS has 30 centimeters from the object. It goes on the element 1, group 1, which is actually quite a very good resolution, and it allows you to check for welds and perform welding inspection through the ELIOS. It does, as we mentioned before, up to 15 minutes flight time, about, I would say, probably 12 minutes that you have on a good inspection. And then the amount of data that you collect is just, enormous. We are, for the 35 meters diameter tank, it was about 96 gigabytes. That's only for roof inspection. We didn't do anything else, but only roof inspection, 96 gigabytes. And at the end, we don't have to have a visual line of sight. Most of the drones, even if you're then applying for special permissions for any operations beyond line of sight, in this case for the ELIOS and in confined spaces, it's outside any aviation authority, and you don't need to have visual line of sight. Actually, it's very hard, I would say, at least for myself, to fly the ELIOS looking at the ELIOS. It's much better to fly the ELIOS just looking at the screen. And that's the main difference, and that's why it's easy to fly in confined space without entry the confined space. In addition, it has a range extender in case of any problems with signals or any special geometry of the spaces to be inspected.
Brilliant, great stuff. Just on the dust-proof lighting, I know you did mention it briefly. Have you ever come up in scenarios or environments where it's really been useful as opposed to the ELIOS one? Because I know you've got both. Obviously, the difference in lighting is quite significant. Have you come up against those elements?
Yeah. For us, I remember once that we performed also an inspection on a boiler. It's just from energy from waste again, and it's obviously very dusty because it has all the ash from the burning, and it's a very difficult place to perform an inspection because of the environment itself, because of the breathing conditions. Even if you are inside, and even if you are outside, it's not the very best environment. And with the ELIOS one, it was almost impossible to get good data because it was so dusty inside that it was very, very hot. Now with ELIOS 2, it's just no problem at all. We don't see any dust. So it has improved a lot, the inspection capabilities, definitely.
Yeah, I think that comes down to the actual orientation of the lighting system around the drone. I think what Flyability does, they listened to the ELIOS 1 and the users when it was first launched, basically, and they said, how can we build upon this? And yeah, they've done a fantastic job with the lighting.
Thanks, George. I mean, from my perspective as the OEM, this I think was one of the low-hanging fruits, one of the easy wins in terms of points of improvements. I mean, we've talked to so many API inspector like Hannah saying, you know, I know that the pitting is there, but I just can't see with the floodlight of the ELIOS one. This was a brilliant piece of engineering and ingenuity from our guys, and we have to say that, you know, it's compared to more complicated improvements like removing the cage from the front of the camera. This was certainly low effort, high results in terms of the quality of the data capture, and it just goes to show that aside sort of from the business savviness, from an R&D point of view, we're always welcome to take feedback from existing customers and try to work with them on try to make the next product better. And I think this is really one of our major points as a company, that we just sort of take things for granted. We know that we're just a drone company, and that the professionals like Hannah can help us really only improve and make the drone even better than what it already is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you nailed it there with that. So we'll move on to the next slide.
Yeah, so for a structural survey, if you can, one more click. Yeah, so we are following, as inspectors, we are normally following recognized international standards. In this case, for the ISO 17637, which is the ISO standard for visual inspection of wells, it already considers the use of mirror borescopes, optic fiber, or cameras when direct inspection is not possible. So therefore, this brings the ELIOS and any all kind of drone inspection into the picture, because sometimes it's that part of like, is it compliant to do an inspection with an ELIOS? Yes, it is, because it is already recognized in ISO standards. So the type of damages or the type of findings that we normally have on structural surveys are mainly, I would say, corrosion, missing objects, or potential drop objects that we can see, as well as any kind of, sometimes we find objects that were left from construction, which is, for me, it's always quite like funny or interesting to see that something has been left there for 50 years and now you have access to see them again. And I think we will see some pictures, on the next slide. And then kind of weld defects or any problems. This picture of the weld defect is not our picture. It's something that I found very interesting. I think it's marine structure inspections that they posted a video in LinkedIn showing this, that they have just a crack or a crack type indication on a weld. If we go to the next slide. Can we go to the next slide, please? Sorry, the one before.
Hang on, there we go.
Great, thanks. So, and then for coating inspection, we are again doing exactly the same. We are, instead of direct vision, we are doing the same with the drones. So the ISO 4628, it has evaluation of degradation of coatings, and it has some pictograms that are the ones that appear on the bottom of the slide that you use to compare your survey, your subject to those pictures, and you have a grade or grading system of how much of that coating has degraded, and it has for rust or for breakdowns or for any general coating failures. So we are using this together with dry film thickness inspection, and also with low and high voltage holiday detection. So we have implemented the DFTs and the holiday detection in our drones also for confined spaces, so we can carry both type of inspections. For the dry film thickness, it's basically just check the remaining thickness of the coating, and then for the people that are not familiar with the low and high voltage holiday detection, is basically to check if there are any holes on the coating system. So if the coating system is not closed, you will always have a corrosion developing under the coating system, which is actually quite dangerous and problematic. So depending, for example, for chemical tanks, it's very common to use low and high voltage holiday detection, and now this can also be done by drones, removing the need of access for confined spaces. In addition, we have the guidelines or the standards for storage tanks, that is the NEWA 159 and the API 653, that nowadays it's quite accepted, it's really widely accepted to the use of drones to check for paint failure, for holes, for pitting, for corrosion products, and also for ships and offshore structures, the classification societies and the IACs, that they are accepting now also to implement drones as a form of inspection. And finally, for corrosion under insulation, as we have mentioned briefly before, what we are seeing is that sometimes they don't know the condition under insulation because there is no access externally, and when they perform an out-of-service inspection, they just want to, the clients, they want to assess if there are any failures on any integrity failures on the shell or on the roof. So what we are offering right now is the combination of the different inspection techniques. So thermal inspection can be performed beforehand when the tank is still in service to detect any possible water ingress or any areas of insulation damage, which are highlighted, and then there is a further inspection to be carried out on those areas of concern. And once the tank is out of service, a visual inspection can be performed with the ELIOS, covering not only the shell, but also the roof structure and any roof plate, and also ultrasonic thickness measurements that can be done internally and external on the tanks. These together, this full package offers a quick access, safe access, and it doesn't require confined space entry, and it allows the client to make the informed decisions and schedule the maintenance appropriately. As it is now for lag or for insulated tanks, the owners or operators are only stripping down the insulation because that's conforming with the out of service, and because they don't have any other way to obtain the data necessary to perform an assessment on the integrity of the tank.
Brilliant, thanks for that insight.
So, and these are, can you do one more click, please? That's, thanks. So I'm presenting two case studies. This is for a sort of tank roof inspection. The tank was a 34-meter diameter tank commissioned in 1962. The owner reported some sagging on roof plates, and they never carried out a roof inspection before, or they didn't have any traceability on any previous inspections performed. As we were already doing some drone inspections and trying to introduce the drones, that the client were trying to introduce drones into the routine inspections, they decided to go for a ELIOS inspection, internal inspection, to assess the condition and check if they needed to do any further investigation. So we entered the tank, and what we found, if you can go to the next slide, sorry. So yeah, what we found was some misalignments, some bolted connections that they were actually not bolted, missing fasteners, but there was no problems in the area of concern. It was just the roof rafter, instead of being connected to the fixing port that it was supposed to, it was simply supported on the ring. So they closed the inspection concern that they had, and they note that the structure of the roof is sound and they can continue operation and bring back the tank in service. We also found foreign objects. That is what I was mentioning before, that for me is always interesting and funny to see when we get there and we see wedges or ropes or bolts that have been left, and now they can be accessed. Most of the times I could assume that if they couldn't remove it, and they said, well, just leave it, it doesn't harm anyone. And in most of the cases, we have to say that we haven't seen them as a drop object hazard, so they can just be left there. But at least there is an assessment of what the condition of the roof structure, and if there is any real concern, then actions can be taken. For next slide. So for this tank, we have a 80% reduction of confined space entry. We access the tank ourselves, but there was no need for the scaffolders or inspectors to access the tank. So it was a reduction of 80% on personnel with need for confined space entry, and 90% reduction of time scale. This is one of them, that instead of doing the scaffold and do a full inspection would take weeks, we did a full inspection in a single mobilization within 8 hours, and we did the processing of the images afterwards. 80% of reduction on cost, and together with that is a definitely reduction of the time scale for the out of service inspection, and therefore the client can get their tank back in operation, back in service as soon as possible. And also the point that is very important, not only for us, but for most of our clients, that is compliance. The inspection was performed, or the data was analyzed by a certified EMEA 159 tank assessor. So in Raptor, we understand that the drone inspections are not only to go there and do the inspection and collect the video and collect the images, but also to analyze the data and to interpret the data that we are collecting and to offer a solution and not only the problem to our clients. And for the second case study, this is a high temperature storage tank. So the client already knew that they had a problem with leakage on the tank shell. So what we offer again was a thermographic inspection. This was only to assess any areas of concern, that it was any part of water ingress or insulation damage. We perform a confined space inspection, full internal of the shell tank and roof structure and the roof, just to assess any corrosion and integrity and any wall-through damages. And finally, we did our ultrasonic thickness measurement on the shell. So they didn't need to remove all the insulation, only on those areas of concern. And with the thickness readings, they are able to calculate the remaining life of the tank, and therefore they can perform this, again, informed decisions of how they are going to carry out the inspections on the best way. And I have to mention about it, like the background photo, we are using ELIOS now also outside for outside inspections on areas that are not very accessible, and it's actually a great advantage. We are doing it mostly for wing girders or for any structural elements outside on the tanks or any other structures, that even for road passes or road passes, I would say that it would be the alternative. It's not very comfortable to do the inspections on those areas, so the drone is a great solution, very quick, and the data acquired is just fantastic.
Brilliant. So, so you're actually using the ELIOS 2 externally as well. Fantastic. So, is that just for getting into areas which are hard to reach? Because I know that you use external drones like the Matrice and like that. So, ELIOS 2, what sort of benefits are you finding compared to that?
Well, the problem is that how close you can get to your asset. So for example, I'm just going to mention for the M2 210 that it has the possibility of having an upward, a gimbal and a camera. So you have access overhead, but the problem is that you can still not get in contact with your asset. So sometimes the areas of concern are just as on the picture, just underneath a structure. So realistically, you cannot approach a drone with the propellers exposed on that structure. So the ELIOS becomes very helpful for these type of inspections. It can contact directly the structure without damaging itself or the structure. So it's not a problem from the integrity or a risk assessment point of view. And we still collected necessary data to do inspection and assessment of the structure.
Just as a comment on the, I think outdoor usages from our point of view are sort of highly discouraged. The drone is very light, and it does require a lot of professional handling when used outdoors. Obviously, we have seen similar usages. I mean, we can't sort of just close our eyes and pretend that it doesn't happen. However, it just goes to show that there's a lot of training required for this kind of operation. Obviously, it is one thing if someone with the dexterity and the experience of Anna does it, and if someone else tries it as the first mission. So for the avoidance of doubt, ELIOS 1 and 2 remain mostly, I would say 99% of the cases, drones for confined spaces. However, obviously they, under the proper conditions and under the proper care, they can be used also for this sort of inspections. And here I encourage you to rely both on the expertise of Coptrz and the one of our own piloting team. Just drop us an email, let us know, this is the kind of inspections that I would like to perform. How can I do it? How can I be safe? And obviously we'll be more than happy to assist you.
Yeah, well, definitely. I think it's the question is always how to use that drone safely inside and outside. But definitely on the ELIOS too, you need to consider if you are going to use it outside, and I completely understand and I agree that is a confined space or an inside drone. But you need to really take into consideration any wind, because just a little bit of wind will just make the flight impossible. So the conditions that you can't fly the ELIOS are very specific. And yeah, we, as a professional company for this, we take everything into consideration and we assess on site if we can perform safety inspection or not. And if we don't, we just don't carry out inspection.
Brilliant. Thanks for going through that. So going on, we have got, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, for the case study, for the case study two for the high temperature storage tank, it just insists on the same. It's a safe solution because we eliminated working at height and confined space entry. It's a quick option instead of doing the scaffold or the conventional access. We just can complete the scope of work in this case in 3 days on site, and all the data was available in 48 hours after the inspection. It's a very cost-effective solution. We can perform multiple scopes and multiple assets in one single mobilization, and we collect all the data to define and build a maintenance strategy and a scope of work that is more into how the asset looks like. And also the data is permanently recorded and it can be made available for any client or third party to review it afterwards.
Fantastic, great workflow from capturing the data to processing it to actually to presenting it to your client. I mean, 48-hour turnaround is very quick.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is just for the compliance, as I mentioned before, is something that most of our clients, they have a high focus on them. So how a Raptor conducts business is we make sure that our camera, a remote pilot camera operator, they have the relevant qualifications and the relevant training. We do have inspectors as EMEA 159 or PI 653 or Classification Society recognized specialists to perform the inspections. We do have also qualified engineers that review the data and assess the data on the best possible way, as well as certified inspectors that with their experience they can provide with any further input to the clients and give the best recommendations. Yes, and I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much for taking your time. That was really great. I think you've got some really good applications. Thank you very much for joining us. I think it's it's definitely made a lot of things clear to a lot of the people putting comments in. Just going back to compliance, just a question from myself. How do you present your data? What's the workflow for that? Is it has a specific compliance that you have to do, or is it just a report at the end of the day?
It depends. Well, I would say that it depends on what you are looking for, and then it depends on the industry or sector that you are working also for. Because in terms of tank industry or like tank farms, you need to go as per the EMEA 159 or the API 653, whatever the client has in their guidelines, or even government regulations in case it's not a government regulation in UK, but I know that there are some government regulations brought to law in different countries. And depending on that, then you have all the visual that is just analyzed and you point out to any areas of concern, or if there is no areas of concern, you just present okay, this is fine, this is where we have been, we don't see any areas or we haven't observed any problems. This is a photo, or these are the photos of your asset. And if there are any particular areas, then we can point out to the problematic part and show what we have seen. But then the workflow, it really depends on the industry, because sometimes, as you know, if we have to do models, then we just collect the data, we go through the point cloud, we create or we build a 3D model, and we analyze on the 3D model, for example, for measuring, even on the ELIOS is the same, but without getting in the model, to measure cracks or to assess any areas or measure length or whatever we need to do. So it depends really on industry and data and what the client are looking for.
Fantastic. No, really appreciate you joining us today. We are just going to go to a quick Q&A. I know we've run over, we're over an hour now, but if everybody would like to continue to put comments and questions into the chat, we will make a conscious effort to get all of those answers by the end of the day. But just on a couple of questions, Junio, have you seen any that have caught your eye that you'd like to bring up?
Yeah, I mean, I was expecting certainly need or could use Anna's reply on this regarding the ATEX intrinsically safe question. So presently there's no drone for indoor confined spaces that can provide this sort of level of certification. And the track record in the industry has not been particularly kind for companies trying to tackle this particular endeavor. It's very complicated, it's very costly, and it's just not feasible at present, especially with regards to the battery technology. In terms of, yeah.
I was just going to say on that, I think the last company who tried to pursue that actually went bust. Is that the French company?
That is correct. Yes. So if you want to look it up on Google, Xamen is the name of the French company. They have experimented with this particular kind of drone technology, but ultimately it was the drone was just too large to be used for confined spaces. And we think, well, I recently spoke to the largest refinery in the Mediterranean, which is very conveniently placed just a few kilometers from where I grew up in Sardinia. And essentially they told me that as far as they're concerned, they do not even use hot work permit. They just use normal permits that they would use to perform confined inspections work. So I've done inspections in Germany where instead of having any sort of intrinsically safe latex environment, you just needed a hot work permit, so pretty much as you were doing a sort of welding fixing. But again, we're still at the phase of the technology where the asset needs to be fitted to receive the technology and not the other way around. But I would appreciate Anna's comments on this, because again, I think she's been in way more refineries than I have, and she's way more familiar with this particular issue than I am.
Yeah, well, from our point of view, and working on refineries or tank farms, basically we just follow hot work permit system. And for confined space entry, you still need the tank clean up to a point, because you cannot inspect anything if it's just full of oil or just very, very dirty, because it's just the sensors will not work, the drone will not work, the data that you are getting, it will be terrible. So there is definitely no point on doing that. So at the end, we haven't seen any restrictions on how we are using the drone. Sometimes the I've had a couple of questions of people asking, can you fly like over water or over any leftover on the tank? And it's just, well, I can, but if the tank is just very dirty, I will not be able to do any inspection, because what I'm only going to be able to see is just dirt on the walls, and I'm not going to be able to perform the inspection correctly. So I think that the answer is just, if they have that tank out of service, you can definitely bring your drone in the tank. And for refinery, while in process, then it's again assess the ATEX areas, and anything that they have 5 meters or they have 2 meters or whatever the ATEX range they have, just work with that and assess the situation on every refinery or ATEX location.
Well, once again, thank you for that comment, Anna. Again, it goes the issues of purging with nitrogen and cleaning and washing the tanks goes back to the fact that the technology is simply not there yet. 5 years ago, this technology didn't exist, and hopefully in less than 5 years from now, we will be able to have a drone that can enter it, even if it hasn't been cleaned and purged. But we're simply not there yet. And again, in spite of these, let's call them restrictions or limitations, the advantages compared to traditional means of inspections are self-evident after this webinar, I think, even more.
Good stuff, guys. I really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Junio. Just to let you know, we are going to finish up now, but for all the questions, myself and Junio will go through them all, and we will get you an answer out, and hopefully continue our conversations. But thank you very much for joining us today. It's been brilliant. I hope you've all enjoyed it. We will be sending out a recording as well, so you will receive a bit of a notification for that, so you can go through if you've still got any questions, or you just want to touch up on some points. In terms of training, equipment, any sort of inquiry you are looking at the actual ELIOS 2, be sure to drop us an email at info@coptrz.com, or to shoot me an email or give us a call directly, and we'd be more than happy to discuss this with. But once again, thank you very much, Junio, Anna. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you very much, George. Thank you, Anna. Appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, guys.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one.
Cheers.
Stay safe.